Hello and welcome to a City Voices interview with Craig Robert. That's Robert, right?
Craig Robert Bayer.
Craig Robert Bayer. I was just curious what the R stood for. I think it's
Robert. That's R stands for Robert. Yes.
So we're interviewing Craig Robert Bayer, who is an academic, a poet, a writer, and very engaged in community life.
That's true.
So let's get started. Craig, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I qualify as an academic because I'm no longer in the university life. But yeah, I am a poet. I'm a writer. I am involved in community work, especially mental health work. Most of my work is done for Fountain House, New York. And it's been a very great experience being part of the clubhouse. To be honest, when I first started Fountain House, which was almost 15-20 years ago, I spent like 2-3 weeks there and I quit because I thought I was going to get wrapped up in doing unpaid clerical work. And then I decided to leave. But years later, I returned because I needed something to do in the mental health community that can be described as activist work. So I rejoined Fountain House, and I made the decision to stick with it no matter what happened there, and it's paid off because more happened there than I thought would happen.
Okay, so Fountain House is a big part of your life, right?
It's become a very big part of my life. Yes.
But I think we wanted to talk about something other than mental health and Fountain House.
Okay.
And that is your passions, your passions for philosophy and
right
and political science,
especially political philosophy. I'm not so much a traditional philosopher, but political philosophy I'm very much into. Literature is another big passion of mine. I studied English at BU, Boston University in Massachusetts. And I would say music is another passion of mine. I'm not a musician, but I love various types of music listening. And I would throw religion in there, only not that I'm an extremely religious person, but I've become very curious about it in recent years.
So what is it about, what religions are we talking about here?
Well, I consider myself Jewish, Reformed Jewish, but it's not like I don't explore other religions. I've looked into Christianity, I've looked into Buddhism. Those are the two I've looked into, hoping sometimes that I had an alternative to Judaism, but in the end, I came back to Judaism. But I've definitely been influenced by Christianity and Buddhism. So,
Judaism has the Kabbalah. Are you familiar with it?
No, that's something that I have yet to explore. I know that it's become a very trendy thing to get involved in, but I don't know much about, to be honest.
Do you not know much about biology or the science books?
I haven't studied biology since it might be my early years in college, if not high school. I'm not really up on biology anymore.
What about the French you took?
The French I took. Good song, very good song. I actually took one semester of French, and I didn't do too well in it. I did that in college to fulfill, the core requirements of my degree. But I've also taken Spanish in high school and Russian in the later years of high school and early college. These are languages which I could have held on to if I used them, but I haven't been in touch with those in years either. So I might retake up Russian again because I feel silly that I studied it and then didn't stick with it.
Is your father Russian?
My great-grandfather actually was a Russian Jew, but my father is not. My great-grandfather, my mother's side, was actually a Russian Jew. That's my connection to Russia in terms of biologically. So.
years ago there was something called a pogrom in Russia. Is that correct?
I believe so, but the legend of my grandfather immigrating from Russia to the United States was this. He was in the Russian army, and every day in the Russian army, he received a piece of bread and a potato. And then one day he didn't receive those, and he decided to leave Russia. So that was it.
Oh.
That was the legend of my grandfather leaving Russia. The Russian army no longer fed him, and so he decided to emigrate.
Did he have family that he brought with him?
I guess he must have brought my great grandmother, but I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know the whole history of the family, but obviously at some point he married and had my grandfather, and I think my grandfather had two other brothers. So
what books are you reading now, Craig?
Actually, I'm reading a combination of books. One is by a socialist and literary critic named Irving Howe, who's no longer with us. He used to teach at the City University of New York, among other places, and he wrote a book called A Margin of Hope, which he calls an intellectual autobiography. And it's a very interesting book. I'm maybe a little bit more than a third through. And he talks about his history growing up in the socialist movement, and then he starts talking about some of the writers he encountered when he was in Princeton and in New York and stuff like that. So it's a very fascinating book. He knew some high-powered writers in both the political and literary realms.
You met some high-powered individuals, scholars in your travels, haven't you?
I don't know. I don't know if I met too many famous people. I mean, in college, I encountered Howard Zinn, who I didn't take courses with Howard Zinn, but I had some interaction with him. I invited him to a discussion group that we held at Boston University. So Howard Zinn, the radical historian and I guess radical philosopher, I encountered, and I had a number of teachers at BU who were not world famous, but they were high quality professors. So
You used to organize lectures
yes,
at your residence, the residence that you had before your current apartment.
exactly. Yes, I tried to replicate something that I had in college. We called it Cafe Renaissance, and that was a discussion group to which we invited professors and students to have informal discussions about various topics. And I missed that a lot when I left school, when I graduated. So I decided to try to replicate that in my residence, in my supportive residence in New York City. I was living in Manhattan at the time. And I managed to convince 2 or 3 English professors to come in and lecture us for free. And I managed to invite some less distinguished people. I mean, they were distinguished, but they were less, traditionally distinguished. I had my stepmother who's got some serious credentials in the music business. She came in and talked with us a couple of times. And we had some people from the neighborhood who were in the mental health world come in and discuss their stories. So we had my friend Charles Yu, who was a Methodist minister in New York City. He discussed some political and religious topics. So I also had a friend of mine who's a jazz musician come in, and he performed with one of his musical friends. So we tried to have a nice educational environment for our residents, which otherwise was kind of dead and boring, to be honest.
How did you convince these lecturers to work for free?
Well, I don't know exactly what clicked in their heads, but what I basically did is I looked them up in their college catalogs, and I wrote letters to them asking them to do this type of charity work, to come in to a supportive residence of people with mental health conditions. And I said that we couldn't pay an honorarium, and for some reason they were moved and they decided to come in and lecture us, and it was very successful. The professors enjoyed themselves, and the residents also had a good time. So,
was it just a single letter, or was there like ongoing correspondence with some of these people?
With some of them, I corresponded afterward, to thank them for coming. One of them set me up with another professor who ended up coming in. So, but it's been a year since I've contacted any of them. But I developed, it was a cordial, interaction. But I can't say that I know them to this day. I'm not even sure if all of them are in the teaching world or even in New York City. So, but it was a good experience doing that. I could probably do that again in Fountain House too, but I haven't gotten around to it. So.
So you're a Fountain House ambassador. What does that mean?
Well, I've called myself that in the past. I think maybe it sounds a little pompous, but the only reason I could call myself that is that I have gone on trips on behalf of Fountain House to represent Fountain House at what we call colleague trainings, where clubhouses teach each other about Clubhouse. It's sort of like an educational experience. So I spent 3 weeks in Britain learning about their clubhouse and about the clubhouse world in general. I also spent a week in Britain. Well, actually, it was a combination trip. Spent like 2-3 days in Britain and 2-3 days in Norway, introducing this communication system. Before COVID, Fountain House was sort of like a pioneer in the mental health world for doing teleconferencing. And we use the Cisco WebEx system, and not Zoom, but Cisco WebEx. And we were introducing it to other clubhouses, trying to get them to sign up for WebEx, the WebEx hardware and software, so that they can communicate with us and study the 37 standards of Clubhouse life, and just exchange information and educational stuff. And I went on trips with staff members at Fountain House to participate in these activities. So I wouldn't call myself necessarily a Fountain House. I did speak at a Clubhouse conference on behalf of Fountain House in Washington, D.C., so I've traveled for Fountain House, but maybe I shouldn't call myself an ambassador. That's a little bit presumptuous, but
what are the most valuable philosophies you've garnered from the books that you've read over the years?
Well, the biggest impact I've had in terms of philosophy, in terms of regular philosophy, is political philosophy. And I've read a number of books written by, I obviously have some background in studying Marx, but I've studied a number of social philosophers and writers, socialist philosophers and writers, including Irving Howe and Michael Harrington, people like those, Noam Chomsky. And those people have had a great impact on my worldview.
Tell us about your worldview.
I read my share of literature, especially British literature, and that influences my worldview too. They don't.
Tell us about the
writers
worldview.
are not necessarily pushing a philosophy, but they get into people's heads and talk about the personal philosophies of their characters, and that has opened me up to different ways of looking at life.
How do you look at life?
How do I look at life? Well, I obviously, because I'm a socialist, I believe that we need a community setting, a worldwide communal integration, not without countries losing their identities, but I do believe that there should be, like my mother used to promote in her own informal and I guess, charming way. She always believed in international relations and interacting with other countries and helping them along in life and stuff like that. And I sort of absorbed it in my genes, I guess. So socialism became my label, trying to create a just society, a just world society in which people treat each other with compassion and respect. But I also believe, but I'm not a hardline socialist in the sense that I don't believe in, socialist dictatorships or trying to impose socialism on people who don't want to deal with it. I guess I learned that from my literary studies, that human beings are very complex, and you can't get them on board with everything you believe, because they have their own belief systems, their own psychology, their own backgrounds, and so I thank God I studied literature, because that made me a more worldly person, and so I didn't get caught up, being being Lenin or Stalin or stuff like that.
Do you have a what is your hope for the world?
Well, I certainly hope that, number one, a vaccine is created that gets rid of this COVID crisis. That's my short-term hope for the world. But my ultimate hope for the world is that not necessarily that capitalism is removed, but that is at the very least made more moral. No exploitation of workers, an elimination of racism and sexism and classism. Basically, a world where people can at least get along, if not necessarily be, absolute buddies and friends, where an elimination, of course, of violence and war, stuff like that.
Do you have an appreciation of how pervasive violence is in our world?
Oh, yes, I'm very sensitive to it. I feel like America especially is getting hit hard by it lately. It's in some ways terrifying, and in fact, it not only scares me, but it gets me very angry. I'm not happy about, some of these white supremacist groups that are causing trouble around the nation right now, creating violence at demonstrations and stuff like that. I know there's not a lot that can be done about it except educating people, but sometimes I wish the government would crack down on them, but I guess that's not going to happen in a democracy.
Okay, that's a form of violence for sure during
Yeah,
protests and political violence and that kind of thing.
right, yeah.
What about like violence that's as common as like a UFC match or like a violent boxing match?
I'm not really into violent sports that much, although I can say that I did watch boxing when I was younger. I'm a great admirer of Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard. People who do it with some grace and with some style. I don't mind watching them, but I think the average boxing match can be kind of brutal and vulgar. And I'm not really into the other fighting sports, because I'm just not, they don't turn me on, to be honest.
But didn't Muhammad Ali had some brain damage from his boxing career? Didn't he develop?
Yes,
like,
yes. I'm not saying that boxing is something that needs to last forever and ever. If if they eliminated boxing, I wouldn't cry, because I know that it does damage to the boxers themselves. But just like I watch football, and football does damage to the football players, I guess maybe I enjoy the sport a little bit too much, so that I put up with that.
Do you like eating meat?
Yes, I am a meat eater. I probably should eat less meat than I eat, but I am. But no, I'm not. I've never been a vegetarian or a vegan. I've always been a meat eater. I'm trying to eat less fattening meats now, but I do eat meat.
The reason I'm asking is
Yeah,
because the animals are killed in a violent way, and this
that
is
too.
you're talking about the
That,
theme of violence.
yeah. That's a tough one for me, because I was raised to be a carnivore in a sense, and I never got out of it. I don't approve of, I can't say that I approve of, the violent end to an animal's life, but, I mean, I guess that's one of my hypocrisies. It's something that I haven't gotten out of, the eating of animals.
Do you think if you saw firsthand the brutality in the slaughterhouses, that could sway you to a bit more vegetarian diet?
Well, I think it definitely would traumatize me. Whether it would turn me around, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it probably would sicken me to see that, and it might turn me around. But I can't exactly say I'm looking forward to experiencing that stuff. So
I hear you. I
Yeah,
struggle with that too. Um,
yeah,
meat's a big part of my life too.
yeah. Okay.
Um, so what else would you like to talk about? What do you want to, do you have something you want to get off your chest?
Something I want to get off my chest. Um, well, I guess one of my obsessions has always been peace in the Middle East and whether the Israeli government was doing enough to bring it about, and whether the Palestinians were cooperative enough. So that's one of those almost unresolvable problems that I've always been obsessed with. It's one of the things that's kept me from visiting Israel, the fear that I could be a victim of violence myself there. So that I
Why,
want to get off my chest. Peace in the Middle East is something I think should be necessary. I'm tired of it from hearing about it over the years, the violence in the Middle East.
you mean between the Palestinians and the Jews?
Mainly between the Palestinians and the Israelis, because, I mean, it seems like there's a sort of like detente between Israel and the other countries there, except maybe perhaps with Iran, where Iran obviously hates Israel and is an instigator in that region. But it seems like most of the other countries, are at least not committing violence. They may not be friendly with Israel, but the violence is mainly coming from the Palestinian issue.
What would you like to see between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
Well, obviously, I'd like to see a peace deal. I'd like to see the Palestinians disarm. I'd like to see the Israelis grant Palestinians citizenship rights. They don't. They apparently, people have compared Israel to an apartheid type system there. I don't know enough about Israel to say that that's exactly what's going on there, but I do get the message from the Palestinians that and other Arabs within Israel that their rights are not secure, and so I have a problem with that. I think I just get this feeling that the current Israeli government, the current president, and the parties in power don't care that much about peace in the Middle East. They'll make it if they can, but they don't want to make any sacrifices or take any risks. They don't. I'm beginning to think they don't care whether there's ever peace with the Palestinians, and I just wish another party would come to the fore in Israel who could, get elected and do something about that issue.
We exchanged some emails, and there was a
Right?
an author that was mentioned in the email. Do you remember?
An author was mentioned in the email.
Yeah, something you were reading.
Um, in
In
the
our
recent email.
recent email exchange.
Oh, trying to remember who we discussed. Was it Lawrence? D.H. Lawrence?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you asked me. I'm trying to remember the question you asked me, and I answered with D.H. Lawrence.
Well, tell us about D.H. Lawrence.
Well, he's just as I said when I was at Boston University. I studied English, and I focused mainly on British literature. And I read in college. I read, and I'm actually rereading a book Lawrence wrote called "Women in Love." I also read by Lawrence a couple of other novels. One about his experiences in Mexico. I don't recall the title of it. It was something with a bird in it. And I also read Lady Shatterley's Lover. And what I'm fascinated with by Lawrence is that not just that he's very candid about romance and sexual interaction, but really gets into the heads of his characters. And he presents you with characters from various walks of life, their point of view in the world. And I find it very educational to be able to read his books and become to understand people who are different from me, different from each other. He writes about people from all over the world. His characters are based on people from all over the world. He was a well-traveled person, and it's just fascinating to me. So, I mean, But I think your question is whether I'd want to be him or be like him or something like
No,
that.
no, 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 no. What have you
Uh,
learned? What have you learned about people from him?
well, first and foremost, that human beings are complex beings. You know, they have they can have many inner conflicts within themselves. They can love and hate somebody at the same time. They can be have a negative, what you might consider a negative political philosophy, but still be fascinating and lovable in their own way. I mean, he deals with interactions between uh, women and men, or men and women, or men and men, and or interactions between families and classes of people, management and workers and stuff like that. And it's just fascinating the way he's able to portray their insights and their feelings and their thoughts in a very insightful way.
What have you learned about human beings from your own personal experiences?
Well, even before I started reading people like Lawrence, I knew from my own experience with myself that I tend to be a complex human being, and I've learned that people around me tend to be complex. You know, you can run into a guy who votes for Trump, but who isn't exactly a moron, or can be very kind in his personal life, even though he's supporting somebody who seems like politically very cruel. So it's you learn a lot about. I've learned a lot just from being a writer and and being a reader, and from interacting with human beings as an organizer, especially when you're trying to organize people. It's a very complex process, because people don't always want to toe the line, get along, uh, work with you on a project peacefully and perfectly harmoniously. I mean, there are always sort of complications, and so I've learned that life is complex. Human beings are complex.
If there's anything you'd want to change about yourself, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I think sometimes I'm engaged too much in self-doubt. I think it hurt my career prospects early on in life, and it's always affected me, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do as a formal career, as a traditional career. You know, I thought maybe law school, or maybe grad school, or maybe going into the movie industry or the music industry, and of course journalism, which I'm into, in a sense, from working with City Voices and Fountain House Publications. But I never got far in any particular field because not knowing really where I belong, not knowing what my niche was. I always felt like I was inadequate to make it in that field. So if I could change myself, I would say I would want more confidence, less self-doubt.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a personal spirituality?
Well, like I said, Reform Judaism is my religion. In terms of my relationship with God Himself, I don't truly attend synagogue too much. Although I pray a little bit in Hebrew, I usually pray very informally by, speaking to God, not, of course, not having a two-way conversation, but over the course of a day, I will, vent my feelings to the higher power, and, ask him for help, or her for help, whoever's up there. And that's the extent of my spirituality. I'm not really an extremely religious person.
Do you pray?
I do pray. I will pray in English to my higher power on a frequent basis, and then there's as most Jews know, there's the Shema, which is a very important prayer in Hebrew, which I recite, which I've been trying to recite in recent weeks, because I want to have at least some sort of connection to religion. But I don't pray a lot in Hebrew. That's because I don't have a tremendous command of the Hebrew language. So.
Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world."
Right.
Do you know what does that mean to you?
To me, and when I figured out what I believe it means, I took it to heart, and I decided that one of the things I had to do, in addition to trying to change the world, as haranguing other people for not doing what they're supposed to be doing, I felt like I had to engage in some religious practice myself so that I could be a more understanding and more compassionate person, somebody more open-minded person, a person who's not so hardline in his own philosophy. So I believe, and the Dalai Lama also speaks in a similar way, talking about how religion is not supposed to be about disciplining others, it's about disciplining yourself. So that's what I've tried to do in recent years, try to exercise more discipline over myself, less anger, less dogmatism in terms of trying to get people to do what I want them to do. Just more morality in my life, trying to be more peaceful, because I can get very angry about politics, especially. I'm not saying it's always worked for me, but religion, I think, has altered my perspective in some ways.
Are you kind to yourself when you're angry or feeling strong emotions?
I'm not, well, sometimes I think a little bit too kind because I like to, bash people politically in my blogs. I haven't written too many political blogs recently, but I think sometimes I'm a little bit too indulgent in that. That's one of the reasons I joined Found House, so I can get away from writing daily political blogs, which seem to be going nowhere. And now I write mostly about Clubhouse. But I think I'm a little bit harder on myself now. I think I expect more of myself when I communicate with people. I try to write in a less emotional manner, a little bit more dispassion. And there's passion in my writing, but a little bit less anger and negative emotion in my writing. I try to write diplomatically now.
What does being kind to ourselves really mean?
Well, I think exercising self-tolerance. I mean, I think I have in the social sphere, I think I have a lot of tolerance for other people, patience with them, understanding, but I tend to be hard on myself. I don't like it when I think I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I don't like it when I fail at anything or make mistakes. So I think being kind to myself really means being a little bit more flexible, not expecting too much of myself, not being too ambitious. I mean, I think it was Samuel Johnson, who's a British writer. He basically said, I don't spend my time too much in the outer world of politics. I try to tend to my own little garden in my own world. And I think maybe I should be doing more of that, tending to my family, tending to my friends, tending to myself, and trying less to, create world revolution.
Do you worry a lot about the future?
I tend to be a warrior anyway, so yeah, I worry about the future. That's one of the sources of my anger, when I see that other people aren't worrying about the future. They're just doing what they feel like doing. They don't care about the consequences to the world. And so I worry about the future for that reason alone, that a lot of people just don't worry about the future. My own future, I worry about it, of course, but I feel like we're sort of on the right path in my life, and I feel like I'm willing to roll with the punches there. But so I'm willing to roll with the punches, whatever comes. So my own future doesn't worry me, but the future of the world I do worry about.
You said you're sort of on the right path?
Yeah, I think joining Found House was a major thing. I think being involved in mental health advocacy was one of the best things I ever got involved in. I probably should have been involved in it a long time ago because my mother suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. But I didn't get into the mental health world until I myself was diagnosed and hospitalized and all that stuff. And since then, I've become a mental health advocate, and I feel like that's what I should have been from the beginning. I had all sorts of other lofty ambitions, but I think this one is my niche, and I feel like this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life, in this realm. So it's comforting to know that I have a place in the world, you know.
You wrote a beautiful poem about your mother. Would you like to say a few words about her?
Certainly, my mother, as I said, suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. I knew her for the first 32 years of her life before she was struck by the disease. And she was an excellent mother. She was almost an obsessive mother. She was, you know, made sure that I had the best in everything, that I had the best clothing, the best food, you know, the best education, all those basic things. She gave me a lot of affection. And when I was in public school, I was not as enthusiastic about education as I became when I, you know, got into college. And so she was riding me throughout public school, making sure I did my homework, studied for my tests, and made sure that my teachers were, you know, engaging me properly. So she was a very important part of my youth. I think a lot of people who are in trouble these days in the world didn't have a mother like that. Their mother was either too busy or too neglectful to give them what my mother gave me. So, and in her later years, you know, her illness grew more intense, both physically and mentally, and it sort of made her an angry and sometimes bitter person. But I managed to at least be a loyal son even at those times, and you know, deal with her issues as they came up. But and you know, I sort of wish sometimes, well, what if I had gotten into a lucrative profession? I could have gotten her better care than, you know, the run-of-the-mill nursing homes that she was in towards the end. So,
do you want to tell us like what she told you toward the end, or is that too private?
Well, I was not there for her final words, unfortunately. But she did not, you know, she didn't generally try to impart wise sayings or profound things when she was talking to us. Often she was making a flurry of complaints about the nursing home that she was in, or about past injustices of family and friends who had abandoned her over the years. So she spent a lot of time doing that. But she was always asking me, you know, what I was up to. She had the delusion that I was a teacher when in fact I never became a teacher. So she was always you know, she's always used to say, well, I think I met a student of yours on the street and stuff like that. So, you know, she tended to think that she had no idea what my sister did for a living, even though my sister tried to describe it again and again. But she always fantasized in a sense that I was a teacher. So, and you know, I knowing how hard it is to be a teacher, I never became that. But you know, I just thought it was interesting. I guess I do have the educational impulse still, though, so that she imparted to me.
Do you believe people can be like teachers even if they're not teaching in formal settings?
Yes, I think people can be teachers. In the mental health community, I run into all sorts of types of teachers. You know, when I was in my residence, I was part of the Tenants Association, and the chairman emeritus of that association was a person who had a MBA degree from Wharton Business School, but because of his illness, he ended up having to retire early on in life. But he made a business of teaching other people, sometimes when they didn't want to hear it, about life and about business and about politics. So he was a teacher in a sense. I consider myself a teacher in the sense that I do lots of writing about the clubhouse. I try to explain to people what's going on there, why it's valuable to people, how a good clubhouse is run, stuff like that. So I'm a teacher in the mental health community too, in my own way. I'm just not a traditional teacher, that's all.
So maybe that's what your mother meant.
I think maybe subconsciously, maybe that's what she was getting at, you know. I mean, you know, that she wanted me. I mean, education was very important to her too. You know, I mean, in a sense, she made me a teacher, but but in an indirect way. That's all. You know.